Welcome back. We're going to go back into free will today because I had a conversation with a friend last night and a bit this morning on the topic, and it just blossomed everything for me. And the point that I've kind of recentered on is maybe the whole point of life isn't whether we choose freely, but whether we become conscious of our choices at all, whether we become conscious of our behavior at all. There's that clip from The Matrix where Neo's talking to the Oracle. The Oracle offers him a piece of candy and he says, "You already know if I'm going to choose it, so what type of choice do I have?" And she said, "You've already made your choice. You're here to understand why you made that choice." Oh, that makes me feel stuff. I feel like that's it, That is the core of it. And maybe that's the truth, because whether we have free will or not, doesn't matter. It still feels like in this life that we do. But even if we wanted to have free will, we have to become aware of our choices in the first place and why we're making the choices that we do. In physics and philosophy, the way that they argue free will is basically by saying that every decision that you make is based on all previous circumstances of your life. So how you were raised, how you were communicated with, whether you ate breakfast that morning or not. There's this really interesting, sad studies that were done on judges who were doing sentencing and whether they did their sentencing before lunch or after lunch. And they found that if the judge hadn't eaten within 4 hours of that sentencing period, they were more likely to give higher sentences because they were hangry people, because the blood sugar levels were low. So the way that physicists and philosophers perhaps will argue free will versus predeterminism is that, well, there's a million circumstances that add up to you making that one decision in this particular way. Okay, so maybe that's true. And perhaps that is true. I mean, we can see how we behave when we're hangry, and yeah, we lose a little bit more control of ourselves, and maybe trauma in our life or experiences that we've had in different situations. Like if you've been in a car accident, when you get in a car, you're going to be more tense. And maybe when you're more tense, you're more likely to make a mistake or drive slow or whatever. So the decisions that you make are influenced by things that have happened previously in your life. And if we don't have free will to choose in every little moment, maybe what it is the ability to have the awareness so that we can become aware of the patterns and why we're choosing what we're choosing so that we can do something differently. And it's not necessarily attaching to stories, even though stories can be helpful at times. I think that we can get caught up on them, like I've said before. But it's just noticing the patterns that I have. So let's say, for example, I shut down whenever conflict happens. It's not that I'm a victim to my life circumstances that made me scared of conflict, that makes me shut down, and I'm unable to express my opinions or share my thoughts. I just kind of submit to whatever the other person is saying, and then slowly resentment builds up inside of me, and then whatever happens. But what I can do is I can notice that, okay, I can see that throughout my life, I have had this pattern of shutting down in conflict. Awareness, that's the key. Understanding, why did I make that choice? Why is it that I shut down? Okay, I don't feel safe in those moments. So how can I shift that? How can I use that newfound awareness on, I'm shutting down right now for some reason. Maybe you don't know it's because you're afraid or because of whatever circumstance happened, but it can be communicating to whoever you're about to enter into conflict with, or maybe you're in the midst of the conflict and you notice yourself shutting down and being able to communicate, I have this pattern of shutting down in conflict. I just need a minute to gather myself. I'm not trying to leave this conflict. I'm not trying to avoid it. I just noticed that I'm about to shut down and I don't want to. I want to be able to be present in this conversation. So let me just remind myself that I'm safe right now, give myself the space that I need in order to gather my thoughts without being so overwhelmed with constant inputs from the outside. So if it's okay, if we just take a moment for a pause so I can gather my thoughts, and then I really want to come back into this. And also asking for help from whoever this person is. Like I want to build this relationship. I want to work through this pattern that I have because I know that shutting down in conflict doesn't help us build anything further. I want to be able to have productive conversations. I want to be able to grow in our relationship and be able to grow in myself, to be able to express myself in moments like this. And so maybe it's in those moments of awareness, of understanding, one, noticing the pattern that you do, noticing that you shut down, noticing that you get triggered whenever someone says this sort of thing or when politics gets brought up, and then taking the steps to change it. Because after all, we are humans, we have human tendencies. We have human chemical makeup, we have things that have happened in our life that do influence us to operate in certain patterns in similar situations. And so we need to have grace with ourselves because we are human. We need to have grace that there are things that have happened to us that made us this way, or maybe certain things didn't happen to us that made us this way, like perhaps a lack of a present parent or deep communication with your parents. Maybe your whole family avoided conflict, and maybe that's why you have these patterns right now. But have grace with ourselves that you don't know until you know. And then once you know, you can take the steps to make a change, to do things differently. The point of being human is not to be perfect. I mean, that's impossible. We're human. Makes me think of, the sin nature, the quote unquote sin nature that religion, at least the Christian religion, talks about us having. But did you know that the original words for sin meant something more like to miss the mark? And it's so interesting how sin can be turned into this thing that if you mess up, if you don't know better, or if trauma happened in your life that created these patterns that led to you making this decision, that you making that decision is all your fault and you will be punished for that. It's an interesting thing because we are human. Things have impacted us. And even if it's not from a trauma thing or from some messed up pattern that happened earlier in our life or something that happened to us that made us choose this quote unquote bad decision, the thing about sin is that the concept of sin is that it's disconnecting us from love. It's disconnecting us from our soul, from what we actually want to experience, because we're not trying to move through life hurting other people. Even if you notice yourself making a choice, maybe you cheat, maybe you steal, maybe there's something that you do, it's not like you're wanting to harm that other person. Maybe you don't know how to handle your emotions. Maybe you don't know how to leave this situation. And so for some twisted way, you did that thing in order for them to leave you. Or maybe there is a part of you that does want to hurt that person because you felt hurt. And so there are things that lead us to make certain decisions. And again, the whole point of it is to become aware of why we do certain things, because wouldn't all of us just want to be connected to love and connected to peace and understanding and grace and joy? I don't think any of us want to feel sad, want to feel anger. I mean, there are moments where anger feels really good. It feels like a release. And so that's important just to be able to have that valve. But I think that we all want to have those beautiful experiences in life, the ones that stereotypically are good and joyful and desired. And so maybe this life is about becoming aware. In that sense, it does almost sound like Earth is a school for souls to learn how to evolve, how to come back to love, how to come back to your soul, how to come back to union with other people, how to have compassion with yourself and with other people. That sounds like a life that I want to live. And so in these moments where we find ourselves behaving in ways that we don't really like, or we're making decisions that we don't really feel aligned with our soul, maybe the free will that we have is the awareness to notice, first of all, that we're in those situations that we don't like, and then noticing the patterns perhaps that got us there. Or why do we keep doing that thing that keeps disconnecting us from love or from where we really want to go? And perhaps it's in the noticing, having that awareness, that the freedom truly begins, that the freedom to choose differently actually is. And noticing that our nervous system is dysregulated, and so we keep making these choices. And if we can take a moment to regulate our nervous system, maybe we start meditating, maybe we go on walks, maybe we start going to therapy, maybe we go to bed earlier, we stop drinking coffee, we do whatever it is that we need. Maybe as we regulate our nervous system, we no longer are victims to our emotional states and to the patterns that have been present throughout our life. Maybe in slowing down, in noticing, in becoming aware, in choosing that I want something different, I want my experience to be different, we can actually choose different. And this transformation, again, going back to sin for a second, transformation doesn't come from guilt, at least not for me. Guilt makes me shut down. It makes me go internal. Transformation begins from revelation, begins from having awareness. And so that's what I'm going to go for in my life. Becoming aware of the decisions that I'm making, why I'm making the decisions, why I'm avoiding certain things, why I've stayed in certain things, because it's in that noticing and really confronting that this is the pattern that I've been in, that I'm actually able to overcome it. and I'm able to realign with love. And when I realign with love, then every choice that I make is in alignment. Every choice that I make is furthering down my path of union with my soul, of with love, of with excitement, of with a sense of aliveness. Love feels like a sense of aliveness to me. And that's what I want. We don't have to have it all figured out today. We don't have to know for sure if free will exists in absolute terms, if there's certain bits of predeterminism, or if free will exists in our ability to become aware of why we're doing certain things, of how we're feeling, and being able to choose differently in that moment. And you don't even have to stop a pattern today. You don't have to. But what we can do is start to become aware, start to become curious of why we're doing certain things. And in that curiosity, things will begin to change naturally. Because in that curiosity, you start to become alive. You're no longer asleep. You're no longer numb. You're no longer just moving through life. All these things are happening to you. No, you become an active participant in life. That's where we can begin to choose. That's when we can begin to perhaps be, to some degree, a creator of our own experience, because we get to choose in each moment what feeling we want to have, how we want to view our life circumstances. And in this awareness, we begin to remember why we're here. Maybe we begin to remember connection with our soul. Maybe we begin to remember the importance of love. And maybe that's the beginning of everything. So thanks for joining me today. I'll see you next time.